Hey, everybody, and welcome to another My JavaScript Story. This week, we're talking to Noam Rosenthal. Did I get close on your name?
Correct. It's Noam.
Noam. This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io. Do you want to just give a brief introduction to who you are, where you work?
Yes, of course. I would love to. So I've been in the front-end JavaScript world for a little over 20 years. Currently, I'm at the end of my tenure at Wix.com, which has been a great ride. Working on the Wix viewer, which is what goes to all the Wix websites. Dealing mainly with loading performance and mobile and everything between JavaScript and CSS. Lots of heavy-duty React. So I started many years ago in like those small .com startups in the 90s, doing little rounded corners with nine cell tables and with no Ajax. We were doing like those iframes that were posting to that were reloading and posting to the parent. It was a great time writing different sites for Netscape and for Internet Explorer 3. Yeah, that's kind of how I started. It was HTML, CSS being new.
How did you get into programming in the first place?
I think my first encounter with programming, I was about 7. And my big brothers were showing me how to draw using a program called Plot with GW Basic on Sinclair.
Okay.
And then I was learning Pascal and trying to create little games with my brother. After that, my first real professional programming job was at my community, like a kibbutz. They decided to start a little startup in the .com time, and they just knew I was kind of, as they say, good with computers. So they said, oh, you're good with computers. Why don't you go learn HTML? That's the thing right now. So I did that, and that's kind of how I started going into the business. Nice.
Yeah, it's fun to just dive in and be like, oh, I remember way back when I got into this or that, So yeah, when you were a kid and your brothers get you into programming and yeah, you kind of look back on that kind of thing. I mean, I remember getting into HTML in the 90s. I was in junior high and high school here in the United States. But yeah, it was just, it was cool. It was fun. And yeah, now I get paid to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you got into web development in the 90s. How have things changed over the last, 20, 30 years?
Yes. It's funny that some things changed and some things didn't at all.
Right.
The things that changed is that would say one thing that changed is that information is a lot more available. It's true not only for web development, but for everything. For learning how to play music, for growing vegetables, for history, web. Back then, a lot of the things we figure out for ourselves, knowledge wasn't that much shared. So that's one big thing that have changed. Also, the web environment is a lot more mature.
Right.
It's kind of obvious to say that, but it's the truth. And where I feel today, kind of I get those phantom pains back to what was in the 90s is when I have to adapt a site to Internet Explorer.
Yeah,
that kind of reminds me of those days where we had to have those Netscape and Explorer versions for everything.
Oh yeah,
where nothing was compatible. The dev tools don't work. You have to have a whole bunch of alerts to know what's going on.
Right.
So when I go back there, that feels a lot like back then.
Mm-hmm.
Also, one thing that's interesting about that time versus today are a few techniques that were really great and are kind of lost today. That's kind of the flip side of it. Back then, HTML was a lot more of a content delivery thing,
right,
and a web application. So, and it was much more connected with the HTTP protocol.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, things like chunked responses, which the browsers are very good at, rendering progressively with chunked responses. Things that almost is gone. You don't see it that much anymore on the web.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big thing back then. And I had the chance to use that at Wix and improve loading performance using that technology. So I was like, oh, the 90s are back, kind of from the back door.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. When grunge background music for that.
Right. So, you've kind of been through a lot of this. You've seen a lot of this. When we were talking before the show, and you actually sent me an email and kind of described your experience, it looks like you've kind of moved through a bunch of other spaces. You mentioned C++, mobile, TVs, browsers, I mean, all kinds of stuff. So do you kind of want to walk us through some of the things that you've done?
Yes, sure. So after the .com crash of 2001, it was kind of hard to find jobs in software. So I went to play bass professionally for a while, but after that,
nice.
Yeah, so it was a fun time. I miss it. I got a C++ job in mobile development. We were building mobile OS here in Israel. And I was in the team that was doing the UI framework part.
The what framework? Oh, the UI framework.
The user interface.
Yep.
In that world, they call it MMI, but it doesn't really matter. Like man-machine interface. So I learned a lot about low-power devices. This was that was an operating system that was supposed to work on a 16 megabyte RAM.
Right.
With only very simple rasterization for graphics, bitmap fonts, like the smallest possible way of doing things. It ended up shipping and working in satellite phones, in those very, very low-powered satellite phones. I learned a lot about efficiency and how to work with very little space. From there, I went to a few startups and ended up working for Nokia via a few purchases.
Right.
Acquisitions. At Nokia, I worked on a C++ UI framework called Qt or Qt. Mm-hmm. It's a very popular C++ framework. I learned a lot about APIs and about working on the different Linux systems. During the time there, I got more and more involved with the browser engines. So Qt was a way to deliver browser engines to the embedded Linux world.
Okay.
So we were actually looking at how to make the TV world use more of that browser engine in Qt. At that time, the TV world was very heavily invested in Flash.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the time where Netflix were using this HTML5 engine to deliver their TV UI? They had a time like that. I don't know if you're...
I'm not sure if I'm familiar with exactly their path through different technologies.
Okay. They were talking... So they had an HTML5 period. So that was in coordination with us and with the work mm-hmm. I was doing there. I was learning a lot about how to put browsers on TVs and also how to write the JavaScript code that would work well on those embedded devices.
Right.
Which have low memory usually. Low memory was usually the biggest problem. Low memory, but a very good graphics acceleration.
Okay.
So during the time I worked on WebKit, and I became like a reviewer on the WebKit project. Who is not familiar with that, WebKit is the browser engine of Safari, and back then it was the browser engine of Chrome as well.
Yep. Isn't Chrome still WebKit?
No, Chrome has switched as a fork from WebKit in 2013, and they have their own engine based on the same original code base.
Okay.
I was doing a lot of graphics work at the time, so I learned about how all those CSS animations and all those little things, how they work internally in the browser.
Right.
Because I had to implement a solution for them for phones and for embedded devices.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up being in a small team that wrote a browser for Nokia as well. It was the Migo browser. There was one Migo phone called the N9 Nokia.
Uh-huh.
Right before the Microsoft acquisition thing. And I was in this little Tiger team that was building that browser. And I learned so much about the web back then, about how you can break sites with a browser.
Right.
And how everything works, how to make things fast. Yeah, I worked on other more C++ roles after that, but when I came back to Israel, I wanted to work for a good Israeli company, and I came into Wix, which is like this large-scale, successful web company. So I went straight back into front end, and I was leading the mobile team in the beginning. We have this great solution at Wix for automatically converting desktop sites to mobile optimized sites. So I was improving on that part, and then got deep into the world of server-side rendering with React, and very, very aggressive techniques of making sites load faster. That was a lot of fun. I think altogether with the projects I was part of and with the teams I was part of, we made sites loads several dozens of percentage better.
Cool. So it's interesting. I mean, you've kind of been through this journey where you worked on mobile interfaces, you've worked on TV interfaces, a lot of that involved web technologies, you worked on browsers, you've worked on mobile browsers. So I'm curious, how does all of this, in the way that we have started using web technologies in more places than just sort of traditional websites, how does that influence the way that you look at web development today?
Yeah, something that I've changed my view on this several times, because in like 2011, 12, there was this web versus native.
Mm-hmm.
It started this whole fight of web versus native, and it's still kind of going on, though in a different way. Back then, I was a huge, how do you say it, ambassador for web, only web.
Right.
I mainly never liked it that for using some sort of service, I have to download something and identify. I always liked the democratic approach of the web, that anybody can post something online,
right,
and everybody else can consume it. And during that time, I was trying to push a lot for using web technologies for apps. And for many years, it's totally failed.
Right.
Trying to do a forward-looking advancement in the UI together with standard-based technologies was not in sync with in terms of time to market and delivery and how the technology progresses. It's just not in sync. So I think I'm less zealous about it, like fanatic today. I'm more looking into how web is more like a content delivery platform, how it can be the best content delivery platform, and how content-based applications can benefit from things like PWA.
Right.
Rather than trying to coerce web technologies to being a technology for full-blown apps.
Yep.
I think that influenced my view of the web, and I think my experience with native development taught me a lot about just in general programming, memory management, efficiency, stability, like in typed systems like C++, a lot of stability comes from how you structure your code statically, how to approach problems by going deeper into the stack.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, a few times at Wix, I got to the point where there was a browser-specific bug, and I downloaded the code of the browser to put a breakpoint in a C++ code to find out what the actual browser bug was, and either try to fix it or at least understand it enough to write a small test case or to write a workaround. I was able to write a workaround for browser bugs by debugging the browser and understanding what the problem actually is. I think that was a nice benefit. Again,
that's cool.
Thanks.
So, what are you working on now?
So right now, I'm actually wrapping up I'm wrapping up at Wix.
Okay.
I'm finishing some things I've started before. I've lately started using the web component standard together with React. Together with the team, we're using the web component standards to also to improve loading performance. Like we're putting the tiny bit of JavaScript that needs to load very, very quickly for the user experience to load as part of web components so that it can respond to server rendered HTML. It's actually an interesting technique. I hope to communicate about it to the world. I don't know how much we can get into today. Let you lead that.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. What we may want to do is just pull that into like React Roundup or one of our more JavaScript focused podcasts and see if there's something there that we can build on.
Sure.
That's really cool. So you said that you're wrapping up at Wix.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you were only planning on staying there for a certain amount of time, or you're moving on to something else now, or?
No, I really love the company.
And
I'm super grateful for being there for the 3 years that I worked there. And I'm going to independence, to being an independent consultant.
Gotcha.
Teaching, solving problems, taking little projects, maybe doing more open source.
Cool.
And living.
Yeah.
Living.
Yep, absolutely. Speaking of which, that's one of the other things that I try and highlight on this show is just, what is it like to live your life? What is it like in a day of your life?
What is it like? What is a day of my life like?
Yeah, like just a regular day.
Wow, I haven't had a regular day in 5 years, I think.
If most people are being honest, that's probably true of most of us. We have a few things that are settled and a lot of things that really aren't.
Yeah. So in my regular day, well, right now my regular days are still about going to work in the morning.
Right.
Now, I usually go to work by a very short bus ride or a bike ride on the beach.
Where in Israel do you live?
Here. I live right on the beach in Tel Aviv.
In Tel Aviv, okay.
Yeah, and Wix is also right on the beach, like
okay,
a mile and a half here. So it's like this beautiful boardwalk ride there and back. Yeah, I get coffee in one of the cute cafes around here. Usually at work, I have some of my own tasks, and also I mentor other people.
Right.
By code reviewing, by soundboarding, and brainstorming. So by product discussions, by architecture reviews.
Right.
So that's kind of what I do most of the day there. The rest of my day has so much stuff going on. So I'm also a musician. So right now, our band is working on a new album.
Right.
Our band is Lost Highways. Check us out. We have this great Wix site, losthighwaysmusic.com.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm also currently producing the new songs for the band, and I'm playing bass there. So right now my days revolve a lot around that because it's coming. I personally go a lot to all kinds of festivals, like Burning Man style festivals.
Mm-hmm.
I like building stuff for them, like making music for them or building little Arduino things.
Right.
And so sometimes I do that, or help organize things like that.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Really build crazy stuff sometimes. Yeah, last year I was teaching myself electronics so I can build those little amateur projects. I'm also like going into a lot of those more spiritual journeys.
Right.
Myself, like meditation and mind body style workshops. I do those a lot.
Right.
So that's what I mean by living. I have a lot of stuff going on. Yeah.
Cool. Man, it sounds like there's so much stuff to talk about, and I kind of want to get you on JavaScript Jabber or on, like I said, on React Roundup or something, and just kind of dive into some of that stuff there.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to push that off.
Sure.
The last segment of the show is picks, and that is just stuff that you want to shout out about. So if you have a favorite TV show or books or tech tools or frameworks or anything like that, if people are looking for that kind of thing, where do they go to get that from you? Or I kind of mixed that up, but do you have some things you want to shout out about first?
No, but let me run a thread in my mind.
All right, I'll go ahead and jump in with some picks then, and you can think about it while I'm talking.
Actually, yeah, I would recommend people they're into the JavaScript world to learn another language.
Okay.
I would say in today's world, maybe TensorFlow.
Ooh, yeah.
I would say open your mind to other things that are totally in a different place. TensorFlow or Rustlang.
Yeah.
One other thing I would give a shout out to is ShaderToy. ShaderToy is a place where you can build those little WebGL shaders.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I used it a lot to learn what the heck I'm doing with shaders when I started with the graphics world.
Right.
So those are a few picks for JavaScript oriented people. Could be that Rustlang would be a good.
Yep.
Would be a good pick. And I would say learning an instrument.
Yep.
I learned so much from that in programming.
I'm also amazed at how many programmers I know who are musicians of one kind or another.
Yeah.
Right. They play some instrument. Some of them also, sing or compose or,
Yes.
Anyway, it's just interesting.
Yeah. So shout out for ultimateguitartab.com.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah. I really recommend not staying in the comfort zone of what you have to do for your work.
Right.
Also, doing volunteer projects. I highly recommend that.
Yep.
I do a lot of little ones. Like if there's an event I'm going to, I would volunteer for writing a little app for it.
Yeah.
So those are little picks. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you asked.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, all of those things are definitely things that I think people should look at and consider. And so, yeah, I like those as picks. I'm going to throw out a few things of my own. So, two of them are books that I've been reading or listening to actually on Audible. One of them is called Sibylla Run, and it is the fourth book, I think, of the Expanse series. So if you watch the sci-fi series, The Expanse, of course now it's Amazon Prime has picked it up, so you can watch it all on Amazon Prime. I think Sci-Fi was gonna cancel it or something, and anyway, Amazon picked it up, and it's been really great. But Sibylla Byrne, that's what it is. Sibylla Byrne. It's so they've done the first three books in the TV series, and they've changed it up a little bit. But yeah, so this is the fourth book, and yeah, they haven't actually made that into TV episodes yet. So I'm looking forward to that. The other one that I recently listened to is called the Seven Principles for Making Marriage Work. And if you're married, what's funny is my wife and we have this great marriage. I mean, we're happy together. We love spending time together. But this book kind of forced us to think about how our marriage works, and it also forced us to answer some questions. Because it has exercises that you can go through with your spouse or partner, and so you just ask them these questions and talk about this stuff. And it's been interesting for us. We're not struggling with our marriage, but we're still gone through some of the exercises just to see what answers we get out of each other. And so that's been really fun. Is just I didn't realize that that happened to you, or that affected you that way, or that you really enjoyed this, or that you've always wanted that, or and just things that I either never knew or have changed over the last 14 and a half years that we've been married. And so so I'm gonna recommend that as well. And one last thing I'm gonna pick is OBS, and it's an online broadcast system, and you can use it to stream out to I've been using it to stream to Twitch. But you can use it to stream to Facebook Live or YouTube or some of the other ones. And I've just been enjoying making videos. And so I'm probably actually going to pull together some video series on how to build certain things or make certain things. And I'm kind of toying with the idea of doing it sort of on things that I haven't done before. A lot of people do Twitch and, they prep and then they go and do it. And I think I might just record myself learning how to do stuff. So I might do an Amazon Alexa skill, or I might do, some IoT stuff that I haven't done before, or home automation stuff, or, maybe I'll go learn React or Vue. I'm fairly familiar with Angular. But just things like that, so that I can get a feel for how that stuff works, and then just go through the process. So it's not, hey, here's how you do this. It's, here's the process we're going through to learn how to do this, and just do some things like that on Twitch. So you'll get to see me make stupid mistakes in Vue, and that's fine. But yeah. So anyway, OBS is the system that I'm going to be using for that. So, and you can actually record and stream at the same time. So then you have a recorded video that you can post up later. So anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Well, those are good picks.
Yeah. Now, Noam, if people want to find you on the internet somewhere, where do they go?
Twitter, Real Noam. It's pretty easy. Or Noam R on GitHub. I'm also Real Noam on Medium.
Nice.
So it's I actually had a few CSS tips there that became a bit popular. I do have one more pick for you.
Go ahead.
So it's a program called Rack. It's this open source modular synthesizer.
Oh, cool.
Where you can have those little components, and you have those little wirings like graphic wirings between them.
Uh-huh.
I'm using it to learn how synthesizers work, but can also be made to actually make music.
Oh, cool.
So I want to shout out for Rack.
Sounds good. All right. Well, that was fun. We'll get links to all of those in the show notes. If you can put the links in the chat, we'll just chat for a minute after we wrap up the show. But
sure.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap this up, and we will be back next week. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.